situation that they are in right now, where the profits are pretty much grounded, but we do know that it has been a problem for quite some time. Of course, there's many other reasons. There's a lot of factors that they are traversing in their skies, as it were. The infrastructure challenges, the supply skills challenges, as well as the high costs. Running an airline, I'm told, is not a cheap exercise, and you'll hear that a lot more. In fact, I believe that if you're in this room, you know that quite well. But the purpose of us being here ultimately is to unpack to what degree mega alliances globally, as well as internally on the continent, could be the factor that turn things around for the aviation sector and perhaps provides the liftoff for profitability. By the way, my name is Fifi Peters, and it is a pleasure indeed to be in your company. So how the session will work, we will be addressed by an expert in the industry, perhaps familiar to many of you in the room who are avid followers of it. And then we will speak with the stakeholders, people who have got skin in the game, who will give us their perspective of the question that we are trying to answer for the next hour. It's regarding profitability, as I said. And then we'll open it up to yourselves. You will be invited to share a comment or ask any of the experts questions that you think they are fit to answer, but more importantly, that you think will advance the conversation forward. So I am looking forward to the next hour. And at this stage, one last mention. I come from South Africa, and I have been surprised by the amount of people who have been reaching out to me just following this conference online. So I imagine that the same applies to you. So do feel free to share some of the reflections that do come out that you think are important for your community of followers on the social media platform of your choice. The hashtag that you can use, of course, is ACF2024. Right. With that protocol observed, I would like to welcome our expert for today, who will lead us and officially open this presentation, Mr. Kamil Al-Awadhi. He's the Regional Vice President for Africa and the Middle East at the International Air Transport Association, IATA. Let's welcome him with a warm applause.
So, good afternoon, everybody. Apparently, Fifi tells me I'm an expert because I have gray hair, which is a good qualification to have. I have to be honest and say that I wasn't sure how I would participate in today's little panel, okay? And I cramped in slides, and just looking at it right now, I wonder if this is something that we can work on, okay? So I'd rather be less formal and more informative than the other way around, okay? If I just go back here, could mega alliances help profits take off, okay? So I mean, the simple answer is yes and no, okay? And what's amazing about this particular continent, there's 54 countries, and I've tried for 3 years to identify 2 common countries within the 54 countries of Africa, and I've had a hell of a time trying to find even anything that resembles 2 countries with similarities. Okay, so in general, alliances always help. Okay, but that comes with huge amount of conditions. All right, and so just going to my notes. Okay, for me, I think when we look at Africa today, alliances is a good thing, but we're still, learning to crawl rather than walk. There are obstacles, man-made obstacles, let me put it that way, within the African continent that prevent alliances succeeding, okay, and for a number of reasons, and I'll try to cover a few, okay. So that to answer that top question, okay. So can alliances support Africa? Yes. Can any one non-African airline adequately cover the African continent as point A to point B? Okay. I doubt it. A lot of airlines operate to a lot of destinations in Africa, but to cover Africa's needs, I don't think a single airline can handle it. Okay, which means in most cases that point-to-point travel, either within Africa or to the end destination, is not always achievable in every state in Africa. Okay, so it's not as straightforward as saying, okay, let's have an alliance. In most cases, if you did have an alliance, that alliance will serve one end more than the other. Okay, and in this case, it'll most likely serve the non-African airlines better than it'll serve the African airline. But I mean, that's not specifically 100% the case. I can argue it this way or that way, all right? But when we look at some of the obstacles, so for aviation to grow in Africa without the alliance, we have obstacles like the high prices of airport charges, flyover charges, taxes, levies, fuel, supply chain for spare parts of aircraft, double taxation of spare parts of aircraft, and so on. So the list is huge. Then you also have the visa issue. In some cases, I had a list, but I didn't bring it with me. It is easier for me from Kuwait to actually get a visa or get into a country than an African to get into the country right next door to them, okay, which is very weird, okay? But that's the fact. So there are obstacles within Africa that prevents the growth of the aviation industry in Africa. And also you have to look at other things. So forget the security requirements that differ, forget the visa requirements that differ, forget the costs that differ, the regulations, the laws, the bilateral agreements, all hinder this, all hinder the possibility to get that sort of alliance and that sort of growth to move within Africa. If I show you, so this is basically what I was ranting on about. I want to show you this. So this exceeded our expectations when we were looking at it in 2023. So we estimated that Africa will reach to 2019 performances by the end of 2024. And I think the CEOs here will remember that was revised by September last year by IATA because it grew faster than we thought it would grow. So today, literally, we are, Africa's aviation is already surpassed 2019 figures, okay? There are some obvious things. So if you look at, and I can't see it on my slides, but if you look at, how do you turn this thing on? Asia Pacific is because the market opened up really late. The Middle East is already surpassed. Europe is already surpassed. But domestic, so that's domestic in the same country, and then into Africa is the red, okay, is still not at 2019 numbers. That means it's dropped, which is strange. Okay, so immediately you can conclude a few things. One is that the higher yielding flights are increasing and have passed 2019 numbers, and the lower yielding flights have not reached 2019 numbers. And make what you make out of that, but there's a lot of logic behind that, okay? Moving on without being too late. Come on. Voila, okay. I'm not going to get into this because I was actually told and warned that I cannot exceed 8 minutes, okay? But if you look at the chart here, you can see, to look at that dotted line, you can see the airlines that are performing really well, the airlines that are performing as expected, and the airlines that are performing below, all right? There's a whole supporting document to this chart, and I'm not in favor of putting this chart up because it opens up a lot of arguments and so on. There's a point that we need to remember that if we estimate a 3% growth year over year for an airline, which is the growth that's sustainable for an airline to grow at and keeps it profitable. That's the average figure, 3%. So if we take that 3% as the average from 2019, i.e. 20, 21, 22, and 23. So if you look at those numbers, 24 should end up with 12% from 2019 numbers, okay, if we didn't have Corona. So we are always benchmarking to 2019 numbers, and I think this will be the last time we bench this year. It will be the last year we bench against 2019 numbers. But if you look at where we should have been if Corona didn't exist, these numbers should be way higher, okay? I keep forgetting I move one and not the other. All right, so this is the big killing factor that demonstrates what we need to do so that we can compete and actually go into an alliance equally, okay? Just looking at this. So if the cost of travel in the gray is what it is for Africa right now, you can see the logistics and calculate with your experience how hard it is to be part of an alliance when you're at this particular level, okay? I'm not saying it's impossible, and in fact, I mean, it's doable, and it depends on, of course, the airline and so on and so forth, but it starts off, Africa starts off as a disadvantage, a big disadvantage. I promise I'll finish quickly. This is also a very important slide. There's a line here, I don't know if you can see it because I can't see it. There's a line here splitting the 7 airlines from all the other airlines, okay? Those 7 airlines are the key players that actually probably reflect all the numbers that you see in every statistic chart, okay? And they are the ones that actually have the non-stop flights to 1/3 of the other countries within Intra-Africa, okay, and also most likely operate heavily outside the African continent. So it shows that if you did want to have an alliance, most likely it'd be those 7 airlines that would be having the alliance. But there are cases where it's not, but nevertheless. Okay. Fuel costs 10 to 20% higher, and in fact there are some places where it almost hits 30% higher, okay, making it complicated. Charges and fees, and I was told off by somebody today to say, don't mention Nigeria, but it's like a DNA issue for me. So Nigeria's Lagos airport is literally the most expensive airport in Africa, and even a little bit more expensive than a few in the GCC like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Doha, Riyadh airport. So you'd think that you were getting, the best service ever. It's like a nightmare to operate in and out of Lagos. We have a whole team working on trying to get the airport sorted out. And it's not just the terminal, it's the runways. I mean, 4 months ago, the runway lights were stolen from the airport. So it's not the fact that the runway lights are not working, they were stolen. So you can imagine the security issues that you have and so on, okay? But yet, imagine being a Nigerian operator there. Imagine the cost of insurance, first of all, which is 8 times higher than anywhere else. The funding is 26% interest. Highest expenses, highest charges. The fuel is about 18% higher than anywhere else, and it's a fuel-producing country. They have a refinery now, and hopefully they will be producing Jet A1 fuel locally, which will bring that down. And imagine the risks associated in operating in and out of that airport, okay? The safety, everybody remembers the fuel issue in Nigeria. We sent a team in there only to find out that the fuelers were adding water to the fuel. So, I mean, imagine that sort of situation, and you're an airline that has invested in one wide body and one narrow body. That's $250 million worth of equipment to operate to that station, because that's your destination. These aircraft arrive and you face all these sort of issues, okay? In the end, to wrap up before I get kicked off stage, it's simply saying, yes, alliances, whether whether it's alliances between the African airlines or with other alliances, okay, or some other form of alliance, okay, it doesn't have to be the classic standard mega alliance format, okay. These can work, but I think it's time for us to first identify all the issues, which has been done repeatedly, admit that these are issues, otherwise you can't fix them, and once everybody admits, is actually draw out a plan to start fixing them. IATA has actually started, and it kicked it off last year, in June last year in Focus Africa, where we intend to unify some of the safety regulations between the African states, starting with the SADC states. And then from there, qualifying the civil aviations to make sure the regulations are unified so that you can accept pilots, engineers, camera crews across the board, none of the certification issue. We're looking at improving the supply chain for spare parts. We're pushing to try to get the manufacturers of the aircrafts to push to lower insurance and funding costs for equipment, so on and so forth. So we're moving on, but it requires about 10 stakeholders in every state. So you're talking about 500 plus stakeholders in Africa to work together to achieve that common goal. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Camille, for that presentation. I have learnt that whenever someone says I'm about to finish up or I'm not going to take too much time, it's generally the opposite. That was an entire 14 minutes. But of insights, I'm sure that we can all agree. And thanks for sharing some of the anecdotes there for us, which I think will make for a much richer conversation. It's about real talk. Because we do have a real challenge, but we've also got a real opportunity to fix it. So I'm hoping that we can continue having frank discussions with the panelists that are about to lead us in that section. Can I please welcome on stage Ms. Yvonne Manzi Makola. She's the CEO of Rwandair. Joined by Dorothea von Boxberg, the CEO of Brussels Airlines. And last but not least, Mr. Abdelhamid Adout, the CEO of the Royal Air Maroc. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for your time. So I think that, Yvonne, it would be fantastic for you to begin. I mean, just given the fact that we're talking about mega alliances and whether they can be the game changer for the profit line, I think that a lot of people in this room would have been following your travels and the recent announcements that Rwandair has made regarding its partnership with Qatar. Camille said yes, no. Just your thoughts on mega alliances being the liftoff for profitability based on what's happening right now at Rwandair. Okay, I think you can try again.
Okay.
There.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. I think I agree with Camille, yes and no. But definitely in the case of Rwanda, it's a yes. It's something that we've looked at in order to scale up and serve the country of Rwanda and the continent the way we'd want to serve it. We'd need to grow at a much faster rate. We found a good partner in Kenya Airways, and we believe that they're the right partner for us to scale up that growth. Rwanda is, as you know, and as you've seen, is a very ambitious country, and the airline is expected to be just as ambitious. So we believe that's the right thing to do. Qatar is taking 49% stake in the airline. There's the project to build the new airport, the new Kigali airport, where there's 60% majority shareholder in that. So the whole plan is not just an alliance in terms of the airline, but also creating a substantial hub here in Rwanda, right in the heart of Africa, to serve as an alternative hub to all the other airports that we have around. And I believe that will work out very well for Rwanda and for Rwanda.
Okay, so just maybe a bit of history as to how this deal came to be. I mean, it is very insightful and encouraging, I think, to see the greater interaction of business activity between the global south, particularly in the recent while. But how did the marriage, as it were, soon-to-be marriage with Qatar Airways came to be? And when you talk about it being a game changer for Rwandair, potentially, I'm sure you must have done the numbers, or you are in the mix or the process of doing the numbers. What does that look like when you're forecasting profitability in the near term?
Well, how it started, it really started between the principals of the two countries, the Emir and our president. The two countries are very close, and we collaborate on a number of initiatives, aviation being one of them. So it came right from the top. So there's a lot of goodwill to make sure that this actually works right from the top. In terms of how it looks going forward, how we looked at it is if we were to grow organically on our own, that's because we're a 100% government-owned airline. That's also a lot of pressure on the government as well in terms of supporting the airline. So if we need to get to that scale, we're looking at, we're currently an airline that operates 13 aircraft, 14 with the freighter. But we're looking at growing that to about 25 in the next 5 years, and then accelerating even more after that. For us to get to that, it would take a much longer time for the airline to get to that level. So a lot of investment will go in the beginning. So we don't forecast immediate profitability, but down the line we do believe that it will be a stronger and more profitable airline.
Okay, Abdulhamid, sir, if I can come to you. Not a lot of profitable airlines in Africa, I'm told. Royal Air Morocco, obviously, being one of the profitable ones. In Camille's slide, we saw the number of countries. I think he mentioned top 7 or so, which could potentially look at further partnerships with regional airlines, Morocco, of course, being one of them. So just your thoughts. We've got 2 yes, no so far on the ability of mega alliances to change the picture of Africa's aviation sector. Where do you lie?
Well, if we think about mega alliance, there are 2 types. One,
can we just make sure that his mic is working?
Is it working?
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, perfect. So 2 types of mega alliances. The first is the case of Rwandair or SN Brussels with big airlines linked to them in terms of equity. The other one is an alliance like the commercial alliances that we all have, Oneworld, SkyTeam, or Star Alliance. We have chosen to go with an alliance with Oneworld that is bringing good business. But in my opinion, the answer will be no. This is not the best way, in my opinion, to make an African carrier a profitable one. You have to fix some basics, and Camille came up with some basics. It's complicated to fly within our continent. It's not cost efficient, very expensive, resources are not there, infrastructure are not there. This is the type of basics that we need to fix. The second one is you have to go through a real transformation internally in terms of processes, in terms of brand equity, in terms of customer experience. We didn't just come and knock at the door of Oneworld to get into Oneworld. Actually, they invited us because we have a strong DNA, we have a strong customer experience, and a strong network. And it took us 50 years to build this. So let's fix first the basics. Let's make our government and our states understand the importance of the network within the continent. The only way to travel from a city to another one on the continent is the airlift. There's no railway, boats will take months, and no highway and routes. So let's invest in this sector and make this industry much more efficient and make the agreements between the states, the civil aviation agreements, much more efficient, quick. All the subjects about costs have to be quickly changed. Otherwise, we can keep on investing, and the strength that we both have, Yvonne and us, Royal Morocco, is that we are state-owned airlines, and beyond the profitability, we have a vision. In our case, the vision is coming from our king that has set up a vision to develop South-South cooperation and South-South economy. And this is how we are today building a strong relationship with many countries, even if some routes are far from being profitable.
I think the Royal Emirates defies the norm, and to a degree even Rwanda, the stereotype right now, just given that a lot of state-owned airlines are in trouble. My country, South African Airways, is not in as much trouble as it was previously, but it's certainly not in the comfortable position in terms of profitability that you find yourselves. And it'll be interesting to hear from yourselves as the audience, as well as the panel, as to whether you think that privatization could perhaps be a game changer, or what needs to happen for the formula to work when the state is involved. That's not the follow-up question I wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you what it would take for you to turn your no to a yes in terms of your view on mega alliances. You mentioned essentially fix the basics. And my question to you is that if the basics were fixed, would you have a different view on mega alliances internally on the African continent?
Yes, one of the basics is to have a vision, and a stable vision, and something not on for the next 2 or 3 years, but for the next 10 to 20 years. Once you have a vision, and once you have the teams and the market that is behind, that you can create, of course, then yes, you have fixed the basics, and to go beyond those basics, you need a license, either with a big airline like Qatar Airways or with commercial alliances.
Okay. Dorothea, ma'am, last but not least, I think you'll give us a very nice outsider view looking into the continent. And again, I'm going to ask where you stand in terms of the question that we're trying to ask about mega alliances, whether you are a yes, no, like Yvonne and Camille, whether you're a firm no, like Abdelhamid. Maybe I'll stop my question there and just find out where you are, and then I'll ask you another one.
Yeah, thank you very much. So indeed, we are participating in the traffic flows from Europe or from the US into Africa, and we've seen it on Camille's picture, so that's a fairly big chunk of the overall traffic within or to Africa, of the African overall traffic. And so I think it's really different types of alliances that you can have. So the equity investment in a larger group is obviously giving smaller airlines scale, and that is also true for Brussels Airlines being part of the Lufthansa Group, and is definitely helping us, because in the end, aviation is a scale-driven business. Airlines are aviation-driven, scale-driven, and if you're subscale, if you're too small, it's very hard to be profitable. And so in that sense, of course, being part of a larger group can definitely help. The alliances in the non-equity sense, like you're a member of Oneworld and we are a member of the Star Alliance, there I would very much agree that it's adding to profitability in a certain sense, but it's not turning around a hopeless case into a super good case or something in that sense. So I think there it's very much something good for the customer, because the customer can rely on certain standards, be it safety standards, but also customer standards like through check-in or baggage through check-in or data sharing in a way that is efficient. So I think that's a good customer promise, and that helps build your brand. And if you're already a huge airline and have a mega brand, then you don't maybe need it so much. But if you're a smaller airline, of course, an alliance can help you building that brand more, or getting trust from customers that don't know you yet but have flown that alliance before and know they can trust the standards. So I would actually very much agree with both of you in terms of depending on the type of alliance, it depends a bit.
Sure, but when you look at the opportunity that we constantly get told of about the African continent, 1.4 billion people, I mean, a combined marketplace, well over $3 trillion US dollars, if we get the implementation, the successful implementation of the AFCFTA correct. When you look at that opportunity, does it entice you in any way to form alliances such as the one that Rwanda and Qatar Airways are talking about right now?
I would probably tend to go more to the question you said before, the question
Sure.
of being privatized or government-owned, because I think as an airline, it is very hard to be profitable. And it goes back to what you said, you need to have very good processes, you need to be very efficient in the things you do, and on the commercial side, you need to also play the commercial tools well, which is actually quite difficult, because I mean there's high seasons when everybody wants to travel, low seasons when you still have your aircraft, you still need to pay for your lease rates or for your amortization, you can't lay off staff just because it's not peak season, so it's a difficult business to run profitably. And in my mind, also coming in the long history from a state-owned company, as
Sure.
did the other members of the Lufthansa Group, I think this efficiency boost happens once you're privatized, because you simply have to, otherwise you don't survive. And so I think that is probably more a prerequisite to becoming profitable than having the alliances. And I fully agree that the African market is full of potential, so a very young population, growing middle classes, then of course also if you go out of Africa, the topic of emigration and people relating of course to their families back in their home countries, or the home country family members wanting to visit the one that emigrated. So that of course is also a big driver for traffic, in that case not within Africa but out of Africa.
Okay.
Yeah? And so the potential is for sure there. But even if there are many passengers, you can run an airline really unprofitably.
Okay, no, point taken. And I think that you have all set out quite nicely a very balanced view on mega alliances, and also different takes on what kind of alliances we're talking about, you know, whether it's a strategic partnership or whether it's partnership within the main groupings. And I think that we're all on the same page in terms of the understanding of some of the difficulties involved in running an airline profitably in this present moment in time. I'd like to move on to the second point that we're here to interrogate as a panel, and also as an audience member, and that being SAATM. So and I'm coming to you, I love that look. It shows me that you've got so much to say. The Single Africa Air Transport Market. I did a bit of reading on ChatGPT, and I found that, the African Union, it's a vision. It's their vision, part of their 2063 vision, of ultimately boosting connectivity. Creating the single unified market. I know I'm preaching to the converted right now, but improving connectivity, reducing airfares, and ultimately enhancing economic growth. Where are we with that implementation, Yvonne?
Well, we're definitely not where we're supposed to be. We've been talking about it, really, for a very long time.
Since 2018?
No, even before then.
My
we had
goodness.
the Yamoussoukro Declaration, Yamoussoukro whatever, and then SAATM. So it's evolved into different titles, but all speaking to the same thing, that in order to connect our 54 countries within the continent, we need open skies. Right now, we are operating under very strict bilateral air service agreements. So if I want to fly to, let's say, Cameroon, I have to negotiate a BASA, which dictates how many times I can fly to which point, with what type of aircraft. And so it's really difficult. Sometimes you're restricted to access that point through another country. So really, when you're talking about that, and the studies have been done that have shown the benefits of open skies in terms of lowering costs. Lowering costs means lower ticket prices, which means aviation is more accessible to more of our citizens, making it really an economic enabler rather than the luxury that it is right now. The reason why there's such high taxes and aviation is so heavily taxed is for a lot of governments, they see it as a luxury product, which it really is not. And if we don't move from that to make it more accessible for our citizens, it's not going to change. So at the moment, in terms of SAATM, I believe we have about 37 countries that have signed as signatories, but even the ones who've signed are not fully implementing it. The discussion now is to move forward with the ones who are ready to move, the so-called coalition of the willing, and we start working together. And once people see the benefits, they'll join. So I'm hopeful that maybe that might work, but something needs to be done. Something has to give. There's no reason why a plane ticket to Nairobi should be $500 and one to Paris $400 or $300, and Nairobi is 1 hour away. It just boggles the mind. So it's something that's really frustrating for a lot of us. But it's something that we really need to get right with all the stakeholders, the airlines, the airports, the governments. Everybody needs to get on board on that.
I mean, you talk about open skies, and not to get into the politics, but feel free to delve into the politics also. I came to your country without an issue. You coming to my country will have a big issue. But maybe also we peg that point. Are you hopeful? Do you think that SAATM will happen in our lifetime?
Yes. I mean, let's put things in perspective. It took 50 years for the UE to have open skies. I think it will take us, of course, less than 50 years, hopefully. But we have to put these things in perspective. But again, I'm sorry to insist, but we need to come back to basics and to fundamentals. How many countries and big cities are building now new airports? Imagine tomorrow you have SAATM. Where will you land all those planes, and where you bring all those customers? Kigali is building a new terminal to reach 8 million passengers. We are doing the same thing in Casablanca to reach 30 million passengers. But how many airports on the continent are really developing themselves to attract and to have all those customers come and land? Same thing for the air services agreements, for the taxes, for the costs. So let's first fix all those basics. The political part will take some time, but if tomorrow SAATM is a reality, it will not change anything, because we will keep on struggling to transport passengers from point A to point B the way we are struggling today.
So I'm going to come back to you, because again, I want to go back to the vision of what the African continent can be, an African continent that's more integrated in terms of the free movement of goods and services. So when investors look at that, I mean, you say you reflect on the state of the airports, just reflecting on what Camille was talking about in terms of the aesthetics of Nigeria's airport right now versus the costs of actually operating there compared to an airport like Dubai. So we know that governments' balance sheets are stretched. And even if government's balance sheet wasn't stretched, perhaps they still wouldn't have enough because it's an expensive business. In your view, what is your experience of how investors are looking at the aviation space and the willingness to participate in the building and the upgrading of airport infrastructure, as you alluded to?
In my opinion, if there is a vision saying that we want to reach X million travelers, and I'm sure that this is what has been done for Kigali, there's a vision. We want to have X million tourists and travelers. We want to make Kigali or Casablanca a hub. We want to attract so many airlines. Investors will come because the market is there. When you see that there's a potential, you will find the money. Again, I mean, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but if there is a real vision being driven, and if the government is behind, the private sector is behind in terms of fulfilling this target, everybody will get aligned.
Okay. Dorothea, do you have some comments on SAATM and how you see that potential opportunity?
Yeah, maybe just from the perspective from the European Union, because it's not purely theoretically that it will bring benefits, but it's very visible. You can see it. Yeah. So in Europe, the prices for airfares have significantly gone down. The traffic has gone significantly up. There are a lot more point-to-point connections, not only between capitals or hubs of airlines, but whole new business models evolving with point-to-point traffic, which is, of course, benefiting the consumer. But on the other hand side, of course, it's a transformation that is not easy to take, and that gets back to what you both said, so the whole topic of getting the basics right. So you need to be an efficient airline to compete openly with many other players, or even with new players that have no luggage, as you may say, on their back. Yeah? And so I would also imagine that it takes a while, and it is a stepwise approach as well, to make sure that it's a doable process for everybody.
Okay. You preempted my next move, because I was going to ask if there are any questions in the room. But I don't, because you already went over, I don't know if I must come back to you. But I'll be nice. Please do. Can we get a mic? Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, so SAATM is important. I'm glad you brought it up.
Sure.
Okay, and the answers are actually all correct. But there are other things that maybe the people on the panel don't see, and because I've been involved in it for a while now. So for it to work, you need a certain amount of countries to sign up. And as Yvonne correctly said, there's 37 or 38. I'm trying to confirm that last one, not sure. Out of that, about 16 have been signatory to the SAATM for over 2 years now. Okay. Question, has it changed? No. Okay. So when you address the third and fourth freedoms, you actually have an issue on the third and fourth freedom, yet we're signing up onto the fifth, okay, which is really weird. And what's strange is I've attended events where it is the civil aviation's end. So to me, the African Union handed this over to the African Civil Aviation Commission, who are responsible to handle this. And of course, they deal through civil aviation authorities. And the civil aviation authorities, for some unknown reason, are unable to actually grasp the commercial end of this, okay? For them, it's my right and your right, and that's how they handle it. And they consume so many times. And collaboratively in a room, they all agree. Once you step out and you invite one to the coffee, they disagree, and then they immediately jump into protecting their state-owned airline, okay? And there's other issues too. Today, even if you signed up all 54 countries, there are some points that are mentioned specifically by Mr. Addu that, yeah, okay, we want to operate. I mean, but the charges are different, the regulations are different, the security requirements are different, there's no visas and the airport can't handle it, the fuel and so on and so forth. I think before SAATM even kicks off, there are fundamental issues, root issues that need to be handled.
Okay. Any other questions? And Amol, I'm going to pick on you. I met him yesterday. I think he's an interesting person. Just to pick up on the point around the investor and how you guys are seeing this opportunity. So he heads up the South Africa unit of Barclays, is the CEO. I won't talk up your book anymore, but what I would ask you is, as an investor or as a representative of investors, how are you seeing the opportunity in the space to deal with some of the low-hanging fruit that have been mentioned by the panel?
Yes, so, hello, can you hear me? Right, well, first, thank you for putting me on the spot. Much appreciated. So yes, I'm Amol Prabhu. I head Barclays, based in South Africa, but I cover the continent. I have to say, Mr. Addu, I was kind of, at least internally, nodding my head when you made your comments, because I think if you get the ecosystem right for investment, could be the aviation sphere or, frankly, any other sector, provided you get that right, investors will come, will be interested, want to do the homework around what to invest, how much to invest, and actually enter the dialogue. But that's absolutely critical. So, and I see this, I spend a lot of time with global investors. I obviously market Africa because that's my patch, my region, but I also know that my own counterpart in the Middle East and in Asia and elsewhere are also doing their own marketing. So I think one thing that people have to understand is investors have choices, global choices in terms of what they're looking at. So making your country, your sector, your particular company attractive, absolutely key. It's not rocket science.
Sure.
It's run your company properly, all the comments that have been made on the panel, and very much around what's your strategy, what's your vision, and are you executing?
Sure.
People talk very well about all this stuff, but where's the execution? And that's what people really, really look at. Where I think this is possibly going, I mean, this today and even yesterday, we're obviously, and I've been very enthused by the aspect of collaboration around Africa, trying to bring everything together, countries working together, helping each other, etc. But I do sometimes fear that we're almost going to get into a 2-tier or 3-tier system where some countries get it and they do execute. We're sitting in one now. When I landed it 2 days ago, it was funny. I'd just come from Singapore, and I was like, "Did I leave Singapore? It looks the same." You know, it's clean, it's trees everywhere, beautiful. But the point is, things are happening in certain countries, and that's exactly what investors think when they land here. So the proof. Sorry, I'm giving a bit of a talk, but the proof's in the pudding, in terms of, and that's what people really look for execution. And I think the countries in Africa that get it and solution and deliver, there is a lot of investment, global investment available. And my final point will be, in fact, we're in a very, very interesting space at the moment globally. I mean, there are challenges in Europe, at the doorstep of Europe. There are challenges in the Middle East. No one really knows, is that going to spill over into something wider, or what's going to happen? Investors are nervous about the regions that they historically have invested a significant amount in. So we've seen a lot of investors where maybe 80% of their investment used to be in developed markets, for example, low return, but pretty much zero risk. Now the conversation is, actually, that's not zero risk. There is risk there, particularly if a black swan event, as it were, occurs. So we've had investors coming to the table saying a lot more. Talk to me about Africa. What's the opportunity? Where is it? Now, the devil's in the detail around the different opportunities, but we have global investors who have a war chest of money to invest, who are pivoting, not entirely, but a certain percentage of their allocations, looking seriously at Africa as well as other places around the globe. And it's also incumbent for countries, CEOs, others, to make their case and market their case.
Okay, perfect. Any other point before I start wrapping it up with the
I would
panel?
just add he needs to prepare $20 billion to buy us planes.
You
200 planes.
You heard that war chest, right? I was like,
you have 6 months to prepare everything. It's already done. You don't need to talk after it.
But jokes aside, though, and just given that you have taken the mic, so he's saying, as a private sector, that the private sector will follow a framework that makes sense. We have heard at this conference, it's my first time at this conference, and what runs quite strongly at this conference is the importance of the collaboration between the private and the public sector. So in as much as perhaps the public sector in Morocco had a vision for how it sees the future of the airline, I imagine that, I hope, or I assume, that there was quite a number of private sector participation that was involved in that vision, and perhaps, but Yvonne, you can just add your thoughts here as well. What did it take to make that happen? Because I think that will take or give us key lessons on how to make it happen better in other countries with airlines, some state-owned right now, where it's presently not happening.
Well, maybe it was not managed this way in the past, but today, even if it's a state-owned airline that we're talking about, the state is acting like a shareholder with a real vision, with needs some return on investments. When we do, we do 8 to 9 board meetings per year, so it's a very tough board that we have. They're not asking us to forget about profits for the next 10 years. No, they're following us on monthly basis in order to make sure that we're profitable. And this is good because tomorrow, and we're not against it, open up the capital of an airline like YNMR can be feasible in a very smooth way. Because even if we keep the strategic part of YNMR, which is the sovereignty of a country, and it's important for us again because we have the vision of the country, we can keep the sovereignty and have partners from the private sector that can come. But we speak the same language. Again, I was talking about fixing the basics and getting back to the roots. This is how, in my opinion, should be done. Let's forget we need to forget that we are state-owned airlines, that we have nothing to deal with in terms of profit and in terms of any kind of private type of management. No, it's wrong. We have to act like a real company, maybe not listed for now, but it could come sooner than we all think. And
You're talking about it?
Excuse me?
Are you talking about it?
Of course, we think about it.
Okay.
And we
Sorry,
talk
I've just got
about
my
it.
journalist hat on now.
And we think about it.
I'm about to break
and
news.
we talk about it. But for that, we need to become stronger. We need to have some fundamentals, again, in a financial standpoint, that are stronger and stronger to make things better for everybody, especially for our shareholder.
Sure. You know, so essentially what you also didn't say is that the shareholder, when the shareholder is a state shareholder, that there also needs to be a level of non-interference in how the day-to-day operations are run, or not significant interference. And I say that just using the example from my country. By the way, I'm a proud South African, and I believe it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world. But when it does come to the operation of the state-owned airline, one of the criticisms that has been levied by the private sector is the fact that there's just too much interference by the government, to the point whereby it's the government who decides who they hire, who they fire, when they hire, when they fire, and for what reason they do so. And it hasn't worked particularly well. But going back to the point around partnerships and collaborations, which is what we're here for, and I think that maybe if you will, even elevate that partnership and collaboration on a continental level in terms of what is working at Rwanda in striking that partnership with the state and your private sector and private sector players like Kenya Airways, and how can that be amplified in your view so that other players on the continent can perhaps share?
I think for Rwanda and Rwanda, one thing that has really helped the airline is the country had a very clear vision. Rwanda is a landlocked country, so the government knew right from the beginning, in order to unlock that, in order to grow the economy, they needed an airline. And they just didn't establish the airline Rwanda Air, but they also made sure all the things were in place to help the airline grow, which is what we're talking about, visa on arrival, in terms of taxes, and we get tax exempt on spare parts, which some other airlines don't. So the ecosystem is conducive to the growth of the airline. And we work very closely with all the other partners, the tourism partners, the export sector, to really make sure that the airline is an economic pillar for this country. Everybody's aligned in that. The vision is clear, and we all work together to execute that vision. So I think that's what's worked very well for Rwanda, and I believe that's what will keep us growing as well. I think for other players in the continent to see if it can work for Rwanda, what we see where Rwanda is right now compared to 30 years ago, in terms of the economy, in terms of being the second, after Cape Town, hosting the most conferences, in terms of what's happening with sports tourism, in terms of what's happening with our exports, and all this being enabled by the airline. If other countries and governments can see the benefits of aviation, and have that clear vision in terms of where they want to take their airlines or how they want to grow the aviation sector in their countries, then I think we'll be a step closer to achieving that connectivity, the intra-African connectivity that we want, and then leverage off the African Continental Free Trade Area, because I don't see how that will work if we're not connecting the countries as well.
Okay, perfect. So I mean, just in closing, we have spoken about the potential of mega alliances in changing the profitability game. We've spoken about the importance of investing in airport infrastructure, such that when you step out of Singapore and you land in Rwanda, it feels like you haven't left. We've spoken about issues around taxes. We've touched on fuel costs. We didn't even get to sustainability matters in terms of how your industry is trying to do that. Just quite a number of bullet points that can and should be focused on to perhaps change the picture around. But Dorothea, I would like to speak to you about something else a little bit. When I was speaking with your team, you've got a really smart team, by the way, they introduced a different element in terms of what Brussels Air is doing. I mean, we've been talking about moving people around, but cargo is really important for your airline as well. How much of a game changer do you reckon then that is to the bottom line, just diversifying your customer base?
Well, I think it's a very important part of a long-haul operation, and I would imagine that also on short-haul, intra-African, it could be a very big helper in making flights profitable. So for us, it's about 10% of the revenues of a flight coming from the cargo business for the long haul, so intra-Europe, not so much. That is crucial in turning profitable. I mean, most airlines don't earn more than 10% profitability, so not having those 10% would be a big loss. And so I think it's definitely worthwhile for any airline that operates in markets where there is air cargo, yeah, sure, to make use of that, no doubt.
Okay. We do have time, actually, 2 minutes, 3 minutes to address the issue around sustainability and what that means for the future profitability of the industry. And I know that this is a point that you made. And also, maybe even chip in regarding manufacturing. There's a point that you also raised around the lead times, sometimes for waiting for spare parts and waiting for airplanes and all of that, and how that can also impact the bottom line. So perhaps just share 1.5 minutes from you around the sustainability issue, and 1.5 minutes from you perhaps on the manufacturing capacity and how to ramp that up.
Well, on sustainability, especially when you're talking about African airlines, when you talk about sustainability, and all the airlines who are members of IATA have committed to carbon reduction by 2025, yeah. But the challenge for a lot of us, and we know that the way to get to that target is through sustainable aviation fuel. But what we have, the challenge we have in the continent is there's none being produced. And there's...
I think you said Dangote might be doing it soon.
I don't know if he started. No,
right,
sustainable
okay.
aviation
Got
fuel.
you.
That means not the conventional kerosene, the Jet A1 fuel that we currently use. The point is we need to get to a point where enough sustainable aviation fuel is being produced that is accessible to us, especially within the continent, and at an affordable price. Because that's the other issue. The little that's there, already African airlines are paying a premium for the regular fuel. Now, if you have to pay 2-3 times more for sustainable aviation fuel, then that's going to be a big hit on our bottom line. So there needs to be more incentives being given for the production of sustainable aviation fuel so that we can access it here, not just when we fly to Heathrow or some of the European countries. So I think that's something that we need to look at very urgently. Otherwise, we'll be at a disadvantage as African airlines.
Yeah, and even as African passengers. I mean, we saw the price of tickets compared to other parts of the world. Maybe just address a point on manufacturing and the ability of the continent to scale up there based on what you are doing in Morocco.
Well, before talking about manufacturing, we have also the subject of sustainable aviation fuel, and we took the decision to start working on becoming a producer of SAF. So we have some partners locally. We have studied all the business models and the different type of technologies, because there are 2 or 3 types, and one has the brightest future for sure. So we're working on this, and it's a very important subject for us. About manufacturing, many years ago, we as an airline decided to take the lead on this industry in order to start the industry in our country. 15, 20 years later, today, there are 140 companies working in manufacturing. 10 out of these 140 are from the group Royal Air Maroc, $2 billion export, and I'm sure we can multiply by 10 these figures in the next 10 years. Why? Simply because there are very few areas in the world where you can have a strong industry in terms of manufacturing spare parts, maintenance, MRO, and very close to Europe, lots of language proximity and cultural proximity. The bad thing about this, it's good, it brings business, it brings lots of things, employment. But then you tend to lose human resources.
Sure.
You have lots of technicians that now are being hired from Europe, from Brussels actually, some of them, but hopefully it stopped. That's why I'm so nice to you today. Even if you took us, our brand manager, Hoyam. Hoyam was our brand manager at Ryanair Maroc, and now she's MD at Brussels.
This feels like it's getting personal.
You see, I was telling you, the basics are here. Bring your check. Okay. So, no, let's be really transparent about manufacturing. Manufacturing has a bright future for the whole continent. We can, of course, work all together because we have the youth, the HR, the education, the proximity, and everything, the weather, the green energy. You have to understand that in Europe, they cannot anymore produce spare parts with green energy. We can. So let's work on this.
Okay. Dorothea, there's still 1 extra minute. As you can see, my timekeeper is fast approaching. Just to give it to you to close it off for us.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I think next year, in our case, we'll be operating for 100 years in Africa. So it's a long time, and I think we've all come... Oh, thank you. No, but the point I wanted to make is we've come a long way, and even if sometimes it looks slow and cumbersome and difficult, I think there's so many things that have developed really well over the times, and I would imagine that we will manage to accelerate it because there's more knowledge available, also the skill sets that you just talked to, and the availability of people that are taught in the right schools, all these things. I think we will be able to accelerate, and you will be able to accelerate that, and then it will go much faster than another 100 years to have a lot done.
Okay.
And we are all invited to the 100-year-old celebration.
I'll do better on you. A low-cost carrier in South Africa is called Fly Safair, and they recently celebrated their 10-year anniversary in South Africa, and they signed a pool of tickets, and they sold the pool of tickets for 10 Rand each. So 100 years, 100 rands, or should we say 100 francs, definitely not euro for us who want to go there. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I mean, to answer the question, can mega alliances be a game changer for profit liftoff? We heard yes, no. I'm not going to repeat the long list of things that need to be fixed before they can, but we do know that if you fix them, then perhaps these alliances can certainly change or chart the aviation industry on a different path. Thank you so much for your time, and see you at the closing.